Okay, so the first problem is how to get close to the enemy if you can't hit him straight away. So in this case we step forward. When we step forward, the enemy strikes us to the head. So we need to do something about it. In this case we will parry with the shield. And when we have parried the opponent's strike, we are free to do our thrust without issues because the opponent's weapon is controlled by our shield at that moment. So it's quite safe to do the thrust. Okay, now we are combining two movements, the step forward and the shield parry. In this way we can do it faster if needed. So now we are combining the three movements together, and the idea here is to minimize the time it takes from the shield parry to our thrust to make it fast. Okay, sometimes we need to move away from our opponent, and in this case we do it by stepping backwards with the right leg. And while we step backwards, we secure the safety by parrying also with the shield, because sometimes the opponent's strike can reach us, so we parry also with the shield. And again, once we have parried, the opponent's weapon is controlled by our shield, so we can make our thrust again in relatively safely. Okay, here we combine once again the three movements, and in this case, same thing, we need to be very quick after our parry. This is how it looks if we do a strike. So we step, parry, and then strike. And it's a good idea to let the sword go to our left hip, not to stop it. So here it's the same thing, but we are moving backwards. Step backwards, parry and strike. Now we are changing things a bit. So we once again go forward, but instead of parrying with the shield, we will do a thrust immediately after the step. Just like here. So if your opponent is not watching you, you can reach him, for example, with a step and a thrust. But when you do this, usually the opponent strikes back. So we step, thrust, and then parry the opponent's strike with our own shield. Now we are combining the step and the thrust to a single movement. And here the parry comes also in, so we step, thrust and parry, and try to minimize the time it takes from our thrust to our parry. So parry as quickly as possible. Same thing, stepping backwards first, and then we thrust. Remember to turn your hips when you thrust in this one. Okay, once again, after the thrust, we try to minimize the time it takes to the shield parry, and you need to pull the sword back after the thrust. So if you have the space, you can do all these in a sequence. So step alternatively with left and the right legs, and parry and thrust, go forward and then go backward. Keep your balance, keep the form. And same thing can be done also with strikes. Step, parry, strike. Step, parry, strike. You can combine all the three movements, but the overall sequence still is the same. So your foot moves first, then the shield, and then the sword. Okay, that's all, folks.